Updating the Obsolete Faith and Culture Model. Table of Contents. Chapter 1 Summary, 2 Introduction, 3 Correlations, 4 Theory, 5 Applications, 6 Misunderstanding, 7 Conclusions, 8 Homework, Bibliography. Chapter 1 Summary. Reformism. On October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg, Germany. In 1934, Mordechai Kaplan published, quote, Judaism as a Civilization toward a Reconstruction of American Jewish Life. After another century passed, in early February 2026 in Austin, Texas, Ricardo Turrios Bonilla uploaded to social media his one postulate to update the outdated Jewish Reform Synagogue model and by extension to models of other faiths. Case study. The case study of the CBI synagogue model is one which evidences the microcosm and equally applies to church, mosque, temple, and other places of assembly. Today's modern synagogue is a vestige of the Age of Enlightenment, whereas the one herein proposed would effectively inaugurate the Age of Cosmovision Peace of the unitriad sign of originary sense. The outdated synagogue model underlies the widespread distancing between religion and population as evidenced by the attendance and the affiliation decline of late. Civilizational distrust and decline are evidenced by people moving away from established institutions. Polarization is driving a wedge between church and state to everybody's detriment and nobody's benefit. Models. In today's outdated Reform Judaism of monoduality, the synagogue is synonymous with sanctuary, whereas with the updated Reform synagogue model, the reconfiguration of the operating system would be a unitriad edifice. That is, a synagogue consisting of a sanctuary for worship, a commons for social justice and business networking, and a shop for creative expression to combat AI and for healing from depression and addictions. As regards the required personnel, for the sanctuary, a liturgical senior rabbi and a Kabbalistic junior rabbi. For the commons, a business entrepreneur and a social activist. And for the shop, an artisan and a therapist. This updated synagogue model would integrate a charted world by an all-inclusive assembly with none of the community members left out. Also, the triad elements of the CBI updated synagogue model would necessarily be autonomous. Microcosm. The microcosm holistic approach was the sweet spot found of undoing our knotted world by way of combining the analytic approach of concrete solutions to concrete problems with the synthetic approach of general theory. This segue provided the conditions for doing a case study of the CBI synagogue model as the universal in the particular and the particular in the universal due to its significant coincidental defining events which made it unique. In a way of speaking, is the conceptual bonding of the trees with the forest, which was the goal pursued to begin with. Postulate. To turn the corner onto the new age of Cosmovision Peace would require the postulate of the unitriad sign of originary sense, which is assumed to have occurred in the times of primeval anarchy, after the times of hunter-gathering, but previous to originary civilization proper. This is achieved by a heuristic approach in the study of the cradle of cradles of the world in the sixth originary civilization. On the one hand, of the primary residue in Mesoamerica, which is roughly present-day central Mexico downwards to northern Central America, and on the other hand, on the secondary residue in JudeaIsrael as first derivative out of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Unitriad principle. The resulting outcome can be expressed as the universal principle and beginning of knowledge as the paradise formula of primeval Kabbalah, namely the God/worship of JudeaIsrael of S/DRP and the creative/life of Mesoamerica as PRD/S, or equivalently of JudeaIsrael's faithism/Mesoamerica's humanism. Once firmly establishing the cosmovision of the unitriad sign of originary sense, the subsequent step is applying it to define the character of the CBI updated synagogue or church or temple model moving forward. The site paradiseism.com provides a friendly access to the author's works, which are found at Amazon. Chapter 2, Introduction. Original title: CBI's Sunni Ripple, Chance Coincidences, and Invisible Hand. Second title: The CBI Updated Synagogue Model for a Resurgence of Assembly, a Church, Mosque, Temple. Third title: The Updated Faith/Culture Model for a Resurgence of Assembly. Fourth title: The Updated Faith and Culture Model of Good and Goods. Fifth title: Updating the Obsolete Faith and Culture Model. The Synagogue. Today's CBI synagogue model, or church, mosque, or temple for that matter, is a specific case study which showcases the universal as microcosm. The synagogue and other temples are vestiges of the Age of Enlightenment gone down the horizon. This light age was good coming out of the dark age and got us where we are today. It makes sense for the times, but things come to pass. Now, why limit the case study to the synagogue and not to all temples? It's taken from my own personal experience as congregant of CPI, as well as due to my limited capacity. Unitriad message. This takes us to the demographics of Austin, Texas. Overall, roughly half of the Jewish population ever touched home base. In the last decade, the Jewish population had the highest rate of increase, all the while the lowest affiliation rate to synagogues. This is where the one message of the triad from the CBI board comes into play. 1. Pursuing a Jewish Renaissance. 2. Making Judaism relevant again. And 3. It's playing a lead role in the outcome. The choice today is between 19th century outdated and third millennium updated synagogue model. Heuristic. You know one, you know them all. You free one, you free them all. One example should suffice. Para muestra basta un botón. So let's free CBI, which is home and is unique. This is the question we'll address in this heuristic exposition. We'll keep it rough and simple to grasp the essence and drone over the details. Donnie and Bibi. Our microcosm case study of the holistic cosmovision approach combines analytics of concrete solutions to concrete problems with universal theory. The challenge isn't the straight issue of simply replacing the old synagogue with a brand new one, or the previous senior and junior rabbis with new ones, leaving Reform Judaism untouched by events as if in cyberspace. Certainly, the limitations of late-stage core Enlightenment age thinking in these worldly times are still within its sphere of influence. The poster children of the breakdown of international order are those of Donnie and Bibi of the West and East, respectively. Coincidences and invisible hand. After all is done, the lingering question is whether the events leading to this final outcome are chance coincidences, or is there an invisible helping hand at work? No hay mal que por bien no venga, que nadie sabe para quien trabaja. After all, what proof is there of the purpose and meaning of life, other than fortuitous happenstances and predestination? There's no problem, there's no theorem, much less proof that I'm aware of. Chapter 3, Correlations. Events. Everything as sweet spot is seemingly in the right place at the right time as resonance or predestination situation. A series of events occurred during the years 2021 to 26 which determine CBI. The main events are the project of a new synagogue building and the replacement of the senior and junior rabbis. But these events didn't happen in a vacuum and have to be understood against the backdrop of the times, the players, and the age. These are itemized in what follows. CBI. Congregation Beth Israel, House of Israel, better known as CBI, is the oldest Jewish congregation in Austin, established as Reform denomination in 1876 by an Ashkenazi and a Sephardi. Its newest facility on Shoal Creek Boulevard, zip code 78756, dates from 1967. Arson attempt. There was an arson attempt at CBI Synagogue on Halloween, October 31st, 2021, which left the sanctuary unusable. This led to the project of the new synagogue to replace the smoked one. Renovation of rabbis. How one envisions the description of the new junior rabbi is intimately connected to how one envisions the edifice of the new synagogue, that is, inward looking or reaching out, a sort of gated defensive community or else an open inviting one. The hiring of a new senior rabbi occurred in 2025 after 33 years of the previous one lasting 1921-2024 to his retirement. There was an interim rabbi during 2024-25. The hiring of a new junior rabbi is planned to replace the previous one who served 7 years from 2018 to 25. Congregants. As things go, synagogue attendance is seen mostly for kids and old folks. Philosophy in meetups is for nostalgics, while science and technology is for the up and about. The congregants are a net mixture of born and raised Jews and converts from near and far. The author of this essay falls in the latter category as one with unique and originary ideas of his own. Reform models. The whole project of Reform Judaism is at center stage. Historically, the landmarks are in the Germany of its birth. The break was with lagging behind Orthodoxy during the Jewish Enlightenment and Emancipation in the 1830s with figures like Abraham Geiger, and later in the USA in the 1920s with Mordechai Kaplan. The mantra of evolution of survival of the fittest is adopt or perish. Synagogue, church, or mosque is all the same. The operating system of today's outdated synagogue of postmodernity isn't serving the community as it should. The updated synagogue model of the Age of Peace cosmovision of unitriad sign and originary sense would be the long overdue reform of Judaism for the 2020s. Synagogue. The Hebrew term for synagogue is Beit Knesset, house of assembly. The Koine Greek-derived word synagogue also means assembly. And since no mention is made, assembly is understood all-inclusive of the community to the exclusion of no one. Church has Greek roots as ekklesia, meaning called out ones, or assembly again. Board retreat. In the board meeting of September 16, 2025, the documents of the Vision Journey Path Forward of the consultant and the Building Together message of the board president were handed out. The board had the inspiration unitriad enshrined in its message, but shy of the will to follow through. The message was Renaissance of Judaism, its recovered relevance, and outreach leadership in a nutshell. The consultant set the conditions, the president the ends, and this author suggested the means in achieving the goals. Social media. Without the leadership role of the board president in diffusing the message of general interest to the community, the burden of making it public for discussion would rest on the shoulders of the congregation. Fortunately, there's social media, which is easier to view and listen than it is to read an arid paper. Point well taken, but it must be clear in order to be understood. Sunni ripple. A ripple fades away rapidly as it expands from its center point. A tsunami, which is much more powerful, arises from an underground earthquake, generating a wave which tends to rise as it reaches the coastlines. Its etymology from the Japanese is tsunami, harbor wave. Hence, we combine both into tsu-ni with ripple as Sunni ripple to signify a modest beginning with strength from the deep and growing stronger with reaching coastal populated areas. Congratulations! If you still don't get it, start by shaking off the brainwashing of school and college miseducation, and you will. Chapter 4 Theory. Originary civilizations. Without loss of generality, due to a lack of knowledge, and in order to make things manageable, the three originary civilizations of India, China, and Andean were left out. Only considered are Mesopotamia and Egypt, though indirectly, by way of its first derivative, JudeaIsrael, and directly solely Mesoamerica. The ages of these six originary civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, Andean, and Mesoamerica are all approximately 5,000 years or more. Kabbalah. Primeval Kabbalah is based on Aleph/Bereshit A/in beginning of, as in Aleph/Genesis 1:1a or Genesis 1:1a/Aleph. the unitriad sign of originary sense of the universal principle and beginning of knowledge is the paradise formula. JudeaIsrael, as first derivative out of Mesopotamia and Egypt, would be twice removed from said residue. Here it is identified with S/DRP. Originary sense. By way of nomenclature, we have shifted to originary sense by analogy with common sense, but it's essentially distinct. The unitriad sign of originary sense is the simplest possible expression which captures in its complexity the essence of all there is, namely, quote, the one whole is and becomes triad parts, unquote. In formulaic, we would then have one whole sought secret S is convert / becomes overt triad parts DRP with Deraj discovered D, Remes reflecting D, Peshat plain P. Catching the gist of updated CBI reform serves as segue to starting the Age of Cosmovision Peace of the unitriad sign of originary sense. It's getting beyond the sphere of influence of the Age of Enlightenment as modernity or as postmodernity. Cosmology narrative. The cosmovision approach is not original. It takes after and is parallel to cosmology as in the Big Bang narrative of the creation of the universe. Here it takes the form of the Big Bang conception of humanity, of the Baby Bang conception of humanity. One of its borrowed elements of the Big Bang theory is the cosmic microwave background, CMB residue. The parallel will be found in the cosmovision of the unitriad sign of originary sense residue as found in the originary civilization of Mesoamerica and in twice removed residue of the first derivative JudeaIsrael out of Mesopotamia and Egypt. The author. He has a calling and is a convert of Anusim Sephardic extraction, originally from Mexico, heir of the originary civilization of Mesoamerica. Anusim refers to the Sephardic Jews forcibly converted to Catholicism during the Spanish Inquisition. The Sephardic had a strong Kabbalah tradition and outside the community founded Freemasonry. He acquired his familiarity with Freemasonry in Mexico City and his knowledge of Kabbalah in Austin, starting with Chabad, then with Reconstruction, dating from his conversion. He started learning medieval Kabbalah and in the process recovered the simplest and originary one of primeval Kabbalah. He has a physics and philosophy background and is overtly familiar with abstract formulas connecting categories. His experience is in teaching high school science and the theory of everything in alternative, detained, and incarcerated juvenile settings. As a STEM humanist, he likes numbers and analysis and letters of synthesis, but loves formulas and equations more. Postulate. The postulate to make sense of things is the cosmovision of the unitriad sign of originary sense of the universal principle and beginning of knowledge as in the paradise formula. The theses are God / pray and obey and hope of the SDRP of JudeaIsrael and creative and caring and community / life of the PRD / S of Mesoamerica. Edifice and personnel. The Age of Cosmovision Peace takes after the residue of Mesoamerican humanism and first derivative Judea-Israelian faithism. It should be reflected in the updated synagogue edifice with sanctuary, commons, and Toltec for shop. As for the personnel, these will be rabbis, the entrepreneur and activist, and the artisan and therapist or tlamatini, respectively. JudeaIsrael. The Hebrew S/JudeaIsrael triad DRP consists of religion, Judaism D, first derivative civilization R, peoplehood in Tanakh P. Religion as Judaism refers to the Torah. By first derivative is meant twice removed residue emanating from the originary civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. The peoplehood is as narrated in the stories of the tradition. Lack of evidence isn't proof of absence. It's a story set in an ideal one, not of history, in a real world. Mesoamerica. The Tlamatini were the Mesoamerican thinkers who developed the diphrasism of Xochitl / Yolisli, flower song / life, also commonly known as Ixtli, Ayotl Yolisli, face, heart/life. Here it is identified as the paradise formula of Mesoamerica's PRD/S of the cosmovision unitriad sign of originary sense of the universal principle and beginning of knowledge. The Toltec were the artisans in the Toltecayotl, whom the Aztecs or Mexiques saw as the epitome of civilization. JudeaIsrael and Mesoamerica. JudeaIsrael can be summed up with S/DRP as in God/pray and obey and hope, or else as creator S, creative/creature, creation DRP, with Mesoamerica of DRP/S as in care and creativity and community/life, or else as experience P, reflection, R, exaltation D, creature/creative life S. Out of Iberia and Mesoamerica will come the next world of JudeaIsrael's theism and Mesoamerica's humanism. The identity of Jews is linked to first derivative JudeaIsrael as much as that of Iberia America is to the originary civilizations of Mesoamerica and Andean, as well as to Iberia. Sin país no hay maíz. No, sin maíz no hay país. There's no country without corn. Congratulations. If you think it's over your head, it isn't. Just claw out of the truckloads dumped on you in college and school. Chapter 5, Applications. Paradise Compliance. In applications of the cosmovision theory of the unitriad sign of originary sense, there's only the one rule of paradise compliance. The starting point in understanding all this is citing classical Kabbalah of Pardes, plus adding the slash and changing vowels to become paradise with sought secret, S, covert being, slash, overt becoming, deraj discover, D, remes, remit R, peshat plain P, which is to say, uni triad sign of the one whole S is slash becomes triad parts DRP. The procedure is to start with the present-day outdated synagogue in question and make it comply with the universal principle and beginning of knowledge. It's that simple to come up with the updated synagogue model. It's better to work our way forward from the cosmovision theory than backwards from today's chaos and crises in an effort to make sense of things. Synagogue models. Let's illustrate the procedure by applying the paradise compliance condition to the subject matter in question of updating the outdated synagogue model. Step 1 is the formula synagogue S/assembly DRP with sanctuary exclamation D, unknown, interrogation R, unknown, interrogation P. Step 2 would then be to identify the two unknowns out of the four variables of sought secret S, deraj discovered D, remes (D) and peshat plain (P), much like in math with equations when finding the values of x and p. The slash plays the role of the equal sign. Case in point, to further provide the reader with an insight or feeling, let's take the classical example of Newtonian mechanics with a formula for force. Namely, F equals ma corresponds to ms over t squared. Force equals mass times acceleration equals mass times space divided by time squared, or else units of mass, space, and time. To cut to the chase, F S slash formula DRP with time D, space R, mass P. This should suffice to illustrate the point and allow us to proceed with the application of updating the outdated synagogue model. Synagogue edifice. Now, taking up again the task of updating the outdated synagogue model. For this, we would have to rely on sample case archetypes out of our Cosmovision toolbox. Let's use the model H of Holy S/human DRP with heart D, head R, hands P, otherwise more commonly understood as Holy S is/becomes human DRP, with spiritual D, mental R, physical P. The obvious association of synagogue is with the worshippers in the sanctuary as heart D or spirit D, with pending homework figuring out the remaining head or mental interrogation R and hands or physical interrogation P. An additional prototype which may come in handy, is the model R of revelation S, divine/human, per reception DRP, with rapture, theology and religion D, reflection, philosophy and business and politics R, research, science and technology P. Keeping our attention focused on the two unknowns of head or mental interrogation R and hands or physical interrogation P, with the help of the above H and R models, we can begin to give viable guesses. The head or mental interrogation R can be associated with the common practice of business networking, but also with social justice. Thus, we can safely define the unknown interrogation R of sanctuary exclamation D, unknown interrogation R, unknown interrogation P as commons exclamation R, understood as business networking and social justice. In similar manner, we can associate the hands or physical interrogation P with art or hands-on healing activities or the likes. Thus, we could safely define unknown interrogation P as creative and healing shop, studio, or Toltec exclamation P, a Mesoamerican term signifying artisan. Finally, we have synagogue S/assembly DRP with sanctuary D, commons R, Toltec P, having sanctuary for worship, commons for business networking and social justice, and Toltec for creative and healing fun shop. Synagogue personnel. Now to the tricky part. Who would be in charge of each element in the triad mix of the synagogue? A pair of rabbis is the obvious answer for the sanctuary of worship. But what about the other two of commons of reflection and the Toltec of plain doing? Proceeding something like in the previous example, my guess would be a business person and a humanist for the commons, and a Tlamatini or artisan and a therapist for the Toltec. Leaderships. Judaism is Cosmo/Vision Synagogue DRP. Sanctuary with sanctuary, God worship, liturgical senior rabbi, and Kabbalist junior rabbi D, commons, business networking, and justice activist R, Toltec, creative Tlamatini P. Nation-state model. Now going off topic. Another important application will be applying the Paradise Formula compliance condition to the outdated nation-state model. Presently, we have the, quote, 31A minus, unquote, duocratic civilizational democracy, but applying the Paradise compliance would give us the, quote, 53I plus, unquote, originary primeval anarchy democracy. From a three-power state, one vote per person, A, adult suffrage, and minus weakening democracy, we would transition to a five-power state, three votes per person, I, infant suffrage or woman suffrage 2.0, and plus fortifying democracy. But this is a theme for another conversation. Peace in the Middle East. Again, off topic. The above Cosmovision model, quote, 53I plus, unquote, state would overcome the one state vis-a-vis the two-state solution by focusing not on the numbers 1 and 2, but on redefining the concept of the state. But this, too, is conversation for another day. Chapter 6. The root of misunderstanding of monoduality is the rootless understanding of unitriadity. General rule. As a general rule, things of the outdated synagogue model fall short and can be described as monoduality, that is, as absolute yet opposites to each other, such as God and humanity, as with absolute and doublets. This contrasts with uni/triad of holy, then separated by the slash, and human unfolding as triads, much like the Pythagorean theorem of the right triangle made out of three interconnected lines to make a geometrical figure, namely right triangle S/figure DRP, vertical imaginary side D, hypotenuse complex R, horizontal right side P. Examples abound of monoduality in modernity as late stage of enlightenment, such as church-state separation, also known as theist and cultural or humanist duo. Fortunately, the easy way to rectify this distortion is by requiring Paradise Formula compliance, which, as we say in the case study above, is identifying the unknowns in the formula equation. The missing beginning. Things are broken because we break them in trying to comprehend them. Essentially, what was missing was figuring out how to go to the beginning for the principle. That is, for the cradle of cradles of the beginning of the principle of principles of knowledge. This was achieved by the cosmovision postulate of the unitriad sign of originary sense as explained above in the theory. Before this, the prevailing argument was that of Aristotle of the impossibility of accessing the first cause, thus concluding that since there was no beginning, it must be because there was no principle of knowledge. Applied to the universe, no beginning meant no creation, hence no creator. This gave rise to the stationary universe over the Big Bang theory in cosmology, that is, the unknown and the known, roughly as monoduality. Herein, the mono is the impenetrable, which together with the remainder constitutes the duo, hence monoduality. The residues. This is illustrated in monotheism, duo culturalism of the divine with the heaven and earth duo. Fortunately, we managed to rescue the Cosmovision residue in the originary civilization of Mesoamerica, same which we had previously found in the twice removed residue in first derivative JudeaIsrael. The thing is that without Mesoamerica's residue, Israel's first derivative Aleph/Bereshit wouldn't have been authenticated, and without Judeaisrael's Xochitl/Yulisli as residue of Mesoamerica wouldn't have been identified. One then first. Monoduality of monotheism, duo culturalism comes from Genesis 1:1bg, namely, quote, created powers dialogue with the heavens and dialogue with the earth, unquote. Bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. But before that was Aleph/Genesis 1:1a, or Genesis 1:1a/Aleph, firmly establishing unitriadity. The one precedes, or the one supersedes the first, namely Aleph/Bereshit a in beginning of. The problem is that since enlightenment, monoduality spread and poisoned the well of knowledge till now. Aleph then / Genesis 1:1a. Now, given the gravity of the above assertions, it's imperative that we provide a more rigorous demonstration than mere hand-waving. The key is in the previous one of monotheism, duo culturalism of created powers Elohim, the heavens and earth, as in Genesis 1:1b to g. The answer is in unitriadity of Aleph/Genesis 1:1a or Genesis 1:1a/Aleph. In other words, the Torah actually pre-starts with the mute letter Aleph A, one letter of Hebrew, as in Aleph/Bereshit a in beginning of. Thus, unitriadity of Aleph/Genesis 1:1a or Genesis 1:1a/Aleph trumps monoduality of Genesis 1:1b to g. In longhand, the former can be unfolded applying paradise compliance, namely creator S, creative/creature of creation, DRP, with spiritual D, mental R, physical P. In other words, moving forward, we should have harmonious unifaithism/triad humanism of unitriadity of Aleph/Genesis 1:1a or Genesis 1:1a/Aleph over the problematic monotheism, duo culturalism of monoduality of Genesis 1:1b to g. Scales. Mesoamerica tipped the scales in favor of unitriadity, confirming Aleph/Genesis 1:1a or Genesis 1:1a/Aleph as against the monoduality, rejecting 1:1b to g. Al buen entendedor, pocas palabras. Chapter 7, Conclusion. The microcosm. The above is the solution to the outdated worldview. I have a handful of books at Amazon which nobody cares to read. My first website followed the same fate, so I did a simpler one which grew into a 50-page essay which is mostly ignored. Finally, this pushed me to use social media and have our video. I figured out that the trick consists in finding the way to combine the analytic approach of concrete solutions to concrete problems with universal theory as the holistic approach of cosmovision. That is, a case study of CPI insofar as its uniqueness as defined by its conditioning events made it a microcosm, which was the aim in the first place. Causality. Due to the interconnectedness of things via causality, it's a chain such that present-day events takes us back to yesterday's and the before and so on. Fixing anything today requires fixing everything from the start. Thus, the need of a cosmovision based on the principle and beginning. Hence, a new age of paradise compliance. You cannot really change anything due to causality without changing everything. Hence, the need for a theory of everything. Each event conditions the following events. The backdrop reflects the front stage. All the separate pieces somehow come together to bring about the Age of Cosmovision Peace, and all by way of the CBI case study. Originary sense. The simplest possible is perfectly comprehensible. Kids get it, why can't we? For from it derive all else. In simplest terms, the theory of everything of cosmovision of the unitriad sign of originary sense is illustrated by the coin and the right triangle examples. These are as follows. Coin S is covert / becomes overt, triad DRP, face down D, rim R, face up P. The right triangle S / triad lines DRP, vertical imaginary side P, the vertical imaginary side D, hypotenuse complex R, horizontal real side P. Congratulations. If you made it this far, give yourself a pat on the back for a job well done. Following is the slide 1, the updated synagogue by Paradise Compliance. Chapter 8 Homework Synagogue Unitriad. Let's illustrate by referring back to CBI. A search commission was assigned the task of selecting the assistant or associate rabbi to replace the outgoing junior one. But it's begging the question petitio principii of assuming without questioning the initial point of departure of the argument. Which rabbi begs the question of what synagogue? As we saw above, this led to the unitriad synagogue as sanctuary, commons, and Toltec. In the same vein of thought, synagogue or church or mosque or temple assumes a religion. But as we also saw above, that whole thought S / triad cosmovision DRP with religion D, philosophy R, science P. Back step and forward. The problem is that this regression doesn't even end there. Additionally, this expression of thought leads to the universal principle and beginning of knowledge as the cosmovision paradise formula of the unitriad sign of originary sense. The moral of the story is that to push forward, one has to pull backwards, not to assume the solution beforehand in the answer. It all goes back to the residue in Mesoamerica of Xochitl / Yolisli, flower song / life, and in the twice removed residue of in JudeaIsrael of Aleph / Bereshit, a in beginning of. Plain and simple, to make sense, the institutions of civilization need to be paradise formula compliant. We need to step back to find the end of the thread to serve as guide. Otherwise, we end up in knots, not knowing if we're coming or going, or even if lost or found. Terrestrial analogy. This is where the simile left for homework exercise comes to the fore. It's like being on the surface of a globe, needing to move left until one reaches the sweet spot on the right, and once there and only then proceed rightly. Reach the right from the right by proceeding to the left before moving right. You get the idea. Bibliography. All the above deliberations are founded in my books on my books at Amazon. However, a quick read version found at the website paradiseism.com provides a friendly access to these works. Based on the books by the author at Amazon, in English Ricardo Turiols Bonilla, and in Spanish Ricardo Turiols Bonilla. The YouTube handle is at Rick Turiols Bonilla. Mesoamerican Mosaic Period. The Aleph Bereshit Societal Paradise Principle. Subtitle: Recreating the World with a Missed but Not Missing Originary Sign. June 2025. Mosaic Period. Saving Creation. The Baby Bang of Paradise Civilization. September 2023. The Sweet Spot on the Obvious, All Revealing, Yet Hiding in Plain View. June 2023. Paradise. The Age of Unveilment of Genesis 1:1/Aleph. October 2020. The Principle of World Caring. Peace Shalom by Shalem Wholeness. March 2019. Pardeism. Subtitle: Human Science 101. June 2018. Pythagorean Period. Triads. The Pre-Socratic Origins of Dialogical Science. 2012. Socratic Period. Friends of Dialogue. The Quest of Keeping the Heart. A Philosophy of Practice. 2005. And Dialogue of Friends, Making Sense of the Human Spirit, A Practice of Philosophy, 2005. Recommendation. To get a sense of the text when viewing them at Amazon, please read the description, the front and back covers, and the sample read of the written formats. View this document at the website paradiseism.com. Also visit the vintage website paradiseism.org. Thank you very much.